Breach, 3, 2, 1, breach, breach, breach! Go, go!
Hey guys, it's the Tech Prepper. Hope you're all doing well. This will be a very different video. I'm not exactly sure what the purpose is other than sharing with you guys an experience I'm having in Perry, Georgia. I'm at the American Milsim event. It's an Airsoft event. And in about an hour, we're going to get ready for a direct action mission, and don't really know what all of that is. I'm here just to observe and understand what the commo needs are and provide some feedback on communications for the event. So I used to play a game, I think in the late 90s called Half-Life, and I'm in one of their simulated tunnel systems here, and this feels exactly like being in that video game right now. So I just popped out here into what looks like a underground like subway system, and I have no idea what type of fire we're gonna get, what's gonna go on, but it is really quite cool. It looks like they've got a couple of like boutique shops here. We can go ahead and step into the train car. Oh, guess we can't go that way. Let's try another entrance here real quick. But they even have like simulated fog here. And here's a shot from inside of the train car. And if I'm not mistaken, I think we're actually gonna pop out into the tunnel system here. And like I said, there's a good layer of fog. So it should be a lot of fun. We'll talk about some of the radio experiments we're gonna do. So we're gonna call this a freestyle video, and you're just joining the Tech Prepper in Atlanta, Georgia at the American Milsim event. Anyways, big thanks to Frosty for being a good host and bringing us out. Thanks, bud. Hey guys, we're back at the Tech Prepper compound. I had a fantastic trip at American Milsim, and just a big shout out to Frosty, Toxic, and that entire group that were facilitating the event. Today we're going to do a little bit of an after action report, and we're going to talk about three things. The first are my experiences with my personal communications, some testing I did outside of that event, and the second one is going to be around some observations of the event itself in terms of communications. And the third is a new product I am very likely going to move forward developing based on some contacts I made and based on experiences I've had in the last year and a half with man packs. So if you guys are fans of bags, stick around and we'll talk about that last one at the end. All right, in my last video, I had talked about how I plan to pack my bags. I took 2 carry-on bags that basically had both my laptops, all my batteries, and my small radio devices like my HT. The only thing that was checked was my rucksack that was included in, nested inside of an outer bag, and within both of those bags I actually had my man pack, the FTM 6000 man pack with the battery removed, and there were no issues or damage to any of my gear traveling that way. Now, I elected to sign up for TSA Pre a number of years ago, so I did not have to take off my shoes, my belts, or remove any of my laptops. Leaving Phoenix, Arizona, going through security, there was a bit of eye rolling from the TSA agent who was looking at my duffel bag because there was a ton of gear in there. And he was marking all the little areas, and ultimately I was pulled aside for a couple minutes just for them to do a secondary scan of my bag. And the agent was really nice. He's like, "What do you have in here?" I said, "I'm an amateur radio operator. I have my FCC license in that pouch, and all of this is my radio gear." He quite literally unzipped the first pouch. He saw the hand mic with my FCC license, and basically that was the end of the scan. He let me go without checking out anything else. And this tip was sent to me by a local Doug. So Doug, thanks for that tip. That worked out really well. So I had quite a bit of time before my flight took off, and I actually decided to take my communications plan that I had written down that had the list of simplex frequencies I was going to use with my travel companions, the frequencies that were going to be used by the American Milsim event, and a handful of repeaters that we would be hitting. Now, I didn't have time to program those the night before, so since I had a couple of hours to kill, I started manually programming all of those frequencies in my FT60R. So for those of you who know me, you know I'm a big fan of not using chirp and really getting to know your radio and programming it. So I programmed maybe about 10 or so different frequencies in here, and had really no issues. I also assigned labels to it, and that's an area that I haven't done too much in the past, so I actually put together a small cheat sheet, a 3x5 index card for myself. The other thing I have purchased recently, which I've never had, was a cloning cable, and depending on your radio, they may have different cloning cable options. And the reason why that was important was I brought a second FT60R, which I never do, but I'm going to start doing from now on. And the cool thing was, after I had everything programmed, I went ahead and cloned it to the second radio. So they were 100% identical. And the plan there was, one, for me to have a backup just in case the primary radio failed. But more than anything, I was traveling with the owner of Armor Lock, Seth, and I wanted to be able to hand him my FT60R and for both of us to have the exact same configuration. So another tip for you guys who probably don't travel all that much with more than one radio. I also brought, which I never do, the full manual, given that I was going to be on an airplane up to about 5 hours depending on which way I was traveling. And I actually discovered some new features of my radio that I've never really used before, and just want to talk about those. The first are the use of banks, memory banks. And the FT60R, I believe, has 10 banks, and the use case that I found for that was pretty simple. So my HT is primarily programmed for my home state of Arizona and the type of operating I do when I'm at home. Well, I decided that I wanted to be able to have a separate set of memories just for the actual event at American Milsim, which included only the frequencies that that event was using and nothing else. So consulted the manual, and I was able to take out of the memories I had pre-programmed and took those 4 or 5 frequencies and assigned them to memory bank 1. So now I have the ability to switch to bank 1 and, more than anything, do a scan just against those memories. So take a look at your radio, but I found it fascinating to be able to have a dedicated set of memories or memory bank for a given event outside of my normal usage. I also found another feature that was really cool while traveling. This was a new area, and while I had an itinerary where I had baked in a number of the repeaters that would be along our route, the manual also talked about something called, I believe it was Smart Scan or Smart Search, and it is the ability for you to give it a lower frequency and an upper frequency, and it will go through and scan. And as it's finding frequencies, whether they are simplex frequencies or repeaters, it will go through and automatically assign them to memories. And then you can go through and scan. So it's a really cool way of doing a survey that will automatically save everything to a memory. Unlike traditional scanning, which will just stop when it finds a frequency or pause for a second, this will actually save everything it finds up to, I don't know what the upper bound is. It could be 30 saved entries. I can't really remember. But so the Smart Scan or Smart Search feature was amazing. So my second tip is, if you really don't know all the capabilities of your radio, you feel comfortable with the basics of your radio, thumb through it and see what features could be helpful to you while you're on the road or maybe useful for other situations. All right, so the other cool thing that happened on this trip, I had planned to meet up with the owner of Armor Lock at the Nashville airport. He was gracious enough to pick me up, and we had established in our communications plan earlier that we would both sit on a particular simplex frequency. So when I was out at the arrivals gate, for example, and he was en route to pick me up, we were quite literally using our radios. And this was more efficient than using a cell phone because there were long periods of time where he was either stuck waiting behind a vehicle, and there's no reason to keep the bridge open that long. So for us to be able to do a quick PTT and basically traffic our information was a tremendous asset. We got a few weird looks from people that were like, what the heck is this guy doing? But that was another cool feature. So if you have 2 hams, for example, or if you've got like 2 FRS radios or 2 GMRS radios, I found it really useful for coordinating the pickup. Now, outside of that, we also decided to do some one-on-one knowledge transfer. So when Seth and I arrived at the hotel the following day, we decided to run some experiments. And he's not fully up to speed on APRS or the automatic packet reporting system. So I gave him a deep dive, and not only that, we each took our radios. I had the FT60R, he had the FT270, which is very similar to this, but just a monoband, and we both connected our MobiLink TNCs and ran APRS Droid on our Android phone. So what was interesting is most people think about APRS as being solely a location tracking service, but we want to use it slightly differently. We want to use it just for peer-to-peer text messaging over RF. And we picked a non-standard frequency that is typically reserved for packet use, but not the nationwide APRS calling frequency. And we actually were having a ball just sending messages to each other via the APRS Droid app, RHT, and the MobiLink TNC. And what we found is that the MobiLink TNC, in my experience and after that experience with him, I'm finding it to be the most reliable way, simplest way of doing packet work with an HT or even a mobile station, as long as you can find the cables to interface. And I'm a fan of simple, so it was validation in showing another ham how easy it is to wire up those systems. So I recommend everybody take a look at APRS Droid or APRS FI if you're on the iOS side, and consider getting a MobiLink TNC. I know that they're back ordered now through July, but it's my preferred way to do packet these days. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the American Milsim event. I have to tell you, I was blown away by the venue. It was hosted at the Guardian Centers, and this facility was humongous. It essentially was a campus with chain link fence and barbed wire around the entire campus. There were full streets, small towns. There were like little cities with housing developments. There were areas that had canals with cars that had fallen in with rubble. The buildings, for the most part, had functioning elevators and full interiors. There wasn't like a facade, so the players could actually enter the buildings and basically have a very realistic experience. The direct action mission, which was the clip you saw at the beginning, was a full underground subway. It was really quite amazing. We were able to go through all the train cars, jump onto the tracks. There was a full fog machine there to throw kind of like a little wrench in our visibility when we were taking fire from the opposing team. There were flipped train cars, for example. There was like rubble. I mean, we all had to sign waivers because it was very easy to really get yourself injured with that level of destruction in some of the areas we were walking through. And the event was interesting because the direct action mission had an objective of basically taking out a target and then doing an extract of the target. And then there also was a secondary objective of pulling out 3 casualties on skids, which was really interesting. And this was on top of all of the firefighting that was happening with the airsoft pistols and rifles. So a lot of fun. In terms of the size of the event, there were about 900 participants. There were 2 teams. One was a green team, the other was a tan team. We hung out with the green team, and the communications there were interesting. Of the 900 players, I would say there were probably about 800 Baofeng UV5Rs. Most of the participants did not know anything about their radios. Most of them didn't even run it. So that was really interesting. But outside of that side of it, the communications I was more interested in were things that were what I would like to think of more the net control aspect. So there was one group of admins that were considered game control. They were positioned in a building in the high ground, and they were coordinating most of the logistics, which buildings were captured, for example. And then the team that I was observing, we were at a TOC, or Tactical Operations Center, and it was interesting to listen to the amount of chatter. In general, there were quite a bit of frequencies that were in use, a lot of backfeed going on. So Seth and I, the owner from Armorlock, have some advice that we're going to give those guys to help streamline that operation. One thing I saw that would be interesting would be the use of APRS because of the need to essentially track certain individuals that are part of the admin team. So at various points, we'd have to deploy an admin player, like in a golf cart, to take care of a situation. And rather than reporting that back via radio, since there was already a lot of chatter, having APRS beacons on some of those admin players, sending it back to game control and the TOC would have been phenomenal. So I'm actually working on a really cool project right now for their next event. And I'm basically coming up with an appliance, an APRS appliance that can be deployed at game control and the TOC. It's going to consist of a laptop that is pre-installed with all of the APRS software, including the map. And I'm actually finding a way right now, you guys might get a kick out of this, of interfacing a radio system for I want to say $65. That includes the radio, and yeah, it's going to be a Baofeng radio, the BTEC programming cable, and I have a small USB sound card and a Y splitter I'm experimenting with. And if that all works, I'll do a follow-up video of how you can build an APRS station for tactical visibility for sub $100. So more on that later. So APRS was interesting. One other thing I noticed was that all of the admins, for whatever reason, were running the Anytone 878HT. It's a DMR radio. And one thing that was interesting about that, they asked me to take a look at the APRS capabilities. And I was not familiar with that radio, and I found very quickly that it really doesn't have a full APRS implementation. It is only a beacon. It doesn't provide any way of encoding or decoding packets, which means you can't do text messages like Seth and I were doing the previous day. So based on what they're doing, it's not a big deal because most of the admins are licensed amateur radio operators. They all carry this Anytone, and it will automatically beacon their position. So with the system I'm planning on building for them that will just have the map for visibility, they can actually just track the players. So what they won't have is peer-to-peer messaging, but they really don't need it. And the cool thing is that they could do this all over RF. They don't need to have an iGate, and they don't need to deal with having any local infrastructure whatsoever. So again, more on that later. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is a new area of product development. For most of you guys who know me, you know that I have been focusing on refining my manpack setup for field expedient deployments, whether it's for summits on the air, public service, emergency and preparedness, you name it. Use in the mobile rig, use in the RV, a variety of applications. And I have largely constructed that kit using off-the-shelf bags, like the Helitech E&E pouch, the 511 6x6 admin pouch. Previously, I was using a DLSR camera bag, and a few other bags. But it feels very disjointed. So I'm actually going to get into the tactical bag business very soon, and I'm going to design a bag that is going to work first with the smaller set of radios that I have that are designed to work with the Armorlock TPA pack frames because that is my preferred platform. And I have a good relationship with the owner, so keep that in mind. So these bags are going to be purpose-built for my use case, for the radios I like to use. So if you guys have the FTM 6000, the FT 818, 817, the FT 8800, 8900, and those smaller radios, this bag is going to be the first bag I'm going to produce. I'm going to do it in a limited quantity because honestly, I think I'm going to do the first run probably at a little bit of a loss. And some of the features I want to share with you guys that I want to integrate, one is a front compartment designed for housing a external 12-volt battery. I want to have a slip for the whip antennas. I want to have pass-through ports for the B and C antennas so you can actually close the top of the flap and still run the antenna systems. I want to have MOLLE attachment points throughout, a spot for a morale patch, D-ring hooks for running a sling or connecting it to a plate carrier or a pack. And the other thing I would definitely want to integrate is the ability to have a built-in rain fly, so to protect it against the elements. So at any rate, guys, there was a lot of information here. So Stay tuned on all things that are coming, but just wanted to give you a little bit of insight about the trip, some experiences I had, and just plant the seed of where I'm taking the Tech Prepper brand in the future. And I just want to thank everybody for the support, especially the new followers. You guys are amazing. I can't do this channel without you. So with that said, I'm the Tech Prepper. Be strong, be safe, and be prepared.